Imagine the excitement that runs through your veins as you plan a camping trip, just you and your loved one. A chance to escape the humdrum of daily life, the monotony of routine. This was the emotion that filled Sarah and Jimmy as they meticulously planned their journey into the wilderness. The thrill of adventure, the anticipation of shared solitude, it was all too tantalizing. They pored over maps, marking their route with careful precision. There was a gleam in their eyes, a sense of expectancy that only such a trip could evoke. The car was packed with all the essentials, a sturdy tent, provisions, and the all-important camping gear. The stage was set for an outing that promised to be memorable, filled with laughter, love, and the joy of being one with nature. Their chosen spot was a secluded area, a place where civilization seemed but a distant memory. It was a landscape that seemed untouched by time, a place where the only sounds were the whispers of the wind and the rustling of leaves. The view was breathtaking, the tranquility absolute. They found themselves in a world where they were the only inhabitants, a world that seemed to hold them in a gentle embrace. The day was spent in blissful harmony with nature. They reveled in their activities, their laughter echoing through the stillness around them. As they lay under the vast canopy of the sky, the stars seemed to twinkle in quiet approval of their happiness. They were in their own little paradise, a haven away from the world. As the day waned, they retreated to their tent, lulled by the comforting sounds of nature. The night descended upon them like a warm blanket, the stillness of the wilderness enveloping them in its serene embrace. Little did they know, this was the quiet before the storm, the lull before a horror that was yet to unfold. The tranquility of the night can sometimes be deceiving, hiding the horrors that lurk in the darkness. The stillness was suddenly broken as Sarah jerked awake. Her heart pounded in her chest as if trying to break free, the rhythm as erratic as her thoughts. An unsettling quiet enveloped her, the silence only interrupted by the occasional rustling of leaves outside. She lay there, her mind racing. She strained her ears, trying to decipher the source of her anxiety. Then it came again, the faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound. It was as though a tiny creature was trying to claw its way through the canvas of the tent. The sound was distant, yet chillingly close. Sarah reached out, expecting to find the reassuring presence of Jimmy next to her. But her hand met only cold, empty space. The pit in her stomach seemed to deepen. Jimmy was gone. She called out his name, her voice a mere whisper, consumed by the enveloping darkness. No answer came. Her fear grew as she fumbled for her flashlight, her hands trembling. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the stark emptiness of the tent. The realization hit her. She was alone. Alone, in the middle of nowhere, with a disturbing scratching sound as her only company. Then she heard it. A voice. Jimmy's voice. But it was distorted, twisted into something sinister. It was as if the darkness itself had swallowed his voice and spat it back out in a chilling, demonic tone. Sarah's blood ran cold. She quickly switched off the flashlight, plunging herself back into the safety of darkness. With her heart pounding like a drum, she huddled in a corner of the tent, covering her mouth to stifle her panicked breathing. Each minute that ticked by felt like an eternity, the scratching sound and the warped voice of Jimmy, her only companions in the agonizing wait for dawn. In the tent's confined space, Sarah's heartbeat drowned out the eerie silence outside. Fear can play tricks on your mind, turning the familiar into something horrifying. In the stillness of the night, Sarah's senses were heightened, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The silence of their secluded campsite was shattered by a sound that chilled her to the bone. Jimmy's voice, but not as she knew it. It was distorted, twisted, as if filtered through a nightmarish lens. The voice seemed to seep into the fabric of the night, weaving itself into the rustling of the leaves and the hooting of distant owls. It was Jimmy's voice, but carried a demonic undertone that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a sound that didn't belong in their world, a sound that echoed with malice and darkness. She was paralyzed by fear, her mind racing with terrifying possibilities. Where was Jimmy? Why was his voice echoing in such a distorted manner around the deserted campsite? As the voice grew louder, her terror spiked. It felt as if the voice was coming closer, hunting, seeking. The decision to hide seemed to be the only logical thing to do. She quickly retreated further into the confines of the tent, her heart pounding with every rustle of the fabric. She covered her mouth, her breaths coming out in short, panicked gasps. She held on to the hope that if she stayed quiet, stayed hidden, the haunting voice would pass her by. The night seemed to grow darker, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Every noise was a potential threat, every shadow a possible nightmare. The distorted voice of Jimmy seemed to be everywhere, a haunting melody that served as a cruel reminder of their peaceful camping trip turned nightmare. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. She could only pray for the morning to come, for the sun to rise and chase away the darkness. She clung desperately to the hope of the dawn, her silent prayers punctuating the terrifying symphony of the night. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, each second punctified by her silent prayers for dawn. The light of day can often bring relief, but sometimes it only reveals the true extent of the night's horrors. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canvas of the tent, casting long shadows inside. Sarah, her heart pounding like a drum, slowly peeled back the tent flap, the morning light blinding her momentarily. What she saw next was something she could never have prepared for, something that would forever be etched in her memory. There, lying just a few feet away from the tent, was Jimmy. But this was not the Jimmy she knew and loved. This was a grotesque caricature of him, a sight so horrifying that it felt like her heart stopped. His face, once full of life and laughter, was now distorted and disfigured beyond recognition. His eyes, once sparkling with joy, were now lifeless and hollow. His skin, once warm to the touch, was now an unnatural hue, cold and stiff. A scream lodged itself in Sarah's throat, but all that came out was a strangled gasp, her voice lost in the throes of shock and terror. She stumbled back, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. The world spun around her, and she felt a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She wanted to run, to scream, to escape this waking nightmare, but her body refused to obey. The horror of the scene was overwhelming, the silence of the morning echoing the magnitude of her loss. The once peaceful campsite, with its breathtaking view and tranquility, had been transformed into a chilling tableau of horror and death. The sunlight, which once promised hope and a new day, now only illuminated the gruesome reality of the night's terrors. In the harsh morning light, the peaceful campsite had turned into a scene out of a nightmare. Even in the face of unimaginable terror, the instinct to survive can drive us to act. Sarah, fueled by adrenaline and sheer terror, hastily packed their belongings into the car. She didn't dare to look at Jimmy's lifeless, disfigured body again. With trembling hands, she ignited the engine and raced off, leaving behind the campsite that had turned into a nightmarish scene. The usually serene drive through the wilderness had taken on a chilling air. Each rustle of leaves, each animal call, echoed ominous and threatening in her ears. As the sun rose higher, the police station came into view, offering a glimmer of safety. Sarah stumbled in, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. The officers listened in stunned silence as she relayed the horrifying events of the night. Each word seemed to hang heavy in the air, painting a grim picture of their camping trip turned tragic. As she relayed her story, Sarah could only hope that the nightmare was truly over.